Welcome to a new deep dive. Today, we're stepping into quite a heavy scene, a courtroom.
Yeah, a custody battle. But the real focus, the source makes clear, is on the smallest person there, a 9-year-old girl named Mira.
We're drawing from excerpts of something called Axel's Bark, a child's silent truth.
And it's an incredible story. It really gets into trauma, silence, the long road to healing, and how truth sometimes shows up in really unexpected ways.
So our mission today is to understand that journey, how this child's silent truth finally found a voice. And a lot of that hinges on this bond between Mira and her service dog, Axel.
Absolutely. The source just drops us right into this courtroom, doesn't it? You've
Yeah.
got Mira, the parents, the judge, Axel, the German Shepherd. The tension is immediate. You feel it right away.
Yeah, it's palpable. So let's unpack that setting first. What does the source tell us about the courtroom itself? How does it feel?
Oh, it paints a really vivid picture. Not just the physical space, but the atmosphere. It mentions sunlight coming through these tall windows, catching dust motes, like they're suspended thoughts.
Nice detail.
Yeah, and the sound, this insistent ticking of an old clock, kind of measuring out the seconds, and the rustling of papers. It's all very formal, very structured.
But holding something deeply personal, deeply messy.
Exactly, all that human drama playing out against this very ordered backdrop.
And right in the middle of it all, there's Mira.
Yes, and the description is so clear. 9 years old, seems small for her age. Her legs are dangling from the chair, not even reaching the floor.
Oh, wow.
And she's clutching this old, worn storybook like an anchor, wearing a simple pink dress with stars. The source says it's the kind meant to feel brave.
A tiny, silent figure.
Completely. Amidst all these adults, the legal jargon, the formality, she's just there, quiet.
And then you have the parents embodying the conflict.
Right, positioned on opposite sides. It's almost visual, isn't it? The source describes the mother, her face just etched with weariness, but also this fierce protectiveness in her eye.
And the father.
He's described as rigid, hands clenched. His gaze is hollow, but there's this trembling agitation underneath. That silent tension between them just vibrates.
But Mira's focus, according to the source, isn't even on them. It's on Axel.
Yeah, the German Shepherd. He's large, calm, but clearly alert, wearing his service dog do not pet. His role is clear.
And he's watching her.
Intently. The source notes his stillness, his patience, but his eyes are locked on Mira. It says he seemed to be waiting for something no one else could see.
And his presence wasn't just random, right? The judge allowed him.
Correct. Based on testimony from her psychologist, recognizing he was vital for Mira. Which brings us to the core issue, doesn't it? Mira's silence.
The reason they're all there, ultimately.
Exactly. She hadn't spoken, not a single word, the source says, in over 18 months.
18 months. That's a long time for a child.
A very long time. And the source emphasizes it wasn't like a switch flipped, it was a gradual thing. A slow fading of sounds. Humming, laughing, asking for stories. Just slowly disappearing.
Like chalk lines in the rain. That's how the source puts it.
Yeah, that's the line. And the reason for that silence, well, it's tied directly to her trauma.
Okay, let's get into that carefully.
The source describes a specific event. A cold winter night. Her father's anger building, pacing, that exploding. Over something small, a wrong word, or maybe a wrong glance.
And it became physical.
Yes. It says he caught her, shook her. Hard. Hard enough to leave bruises. Hard enough for everything to go dark.
Oh, that's rough. And the source makes it clear the impact went way beyond the physical bruises.
Oh, much, much deeper. The bruises faded, sure. But her voice, her sense of safety, her basic trust in the world shattered.
How did she react right after?
Apparently she didn't cry or scream. She just folded into herself, trying to disappear, for safety. Like a part of her spirit just fractured. She stopped reaching out for comfort.
And attempts to help her speak again didn't work.
No. The source mentions months of therapy drawing. Using dolls, even medication was tried. But she remained silent, eyes always downcast. It wasn't defiance. The source calls it pure learned fear.
Just utterly shut down.
Completely. Nothing seemed to break through that wall of silence she'd built.
So this is where Axel comes in, not as a quick fix, but as something different.
Exactly. He's described as a lifeline, part of a trauma recovery program. And their first meeting sounds quite profound.
How so?
Mira was still, silent. Axel came in, quiet, observant, didn't demand anything. The source says it was like something passed between them, like Axel just knew, without being told, that this little girl was the one he needed to protect.
He met her silence with his own quiet presence.
Precisely. No rushing, no barking. He just was. He'd lie nearby, breathing steadily, matching her pace. It took weeks before she even touched him.
Weeks? Wow.
Yeah, and months before the first real sign of connection towards him. It was a slow process built on his patience.
And eventually she started communicating again, but in a unique way, through Axel.
This is really key. Her communication wasn't direct, not towards the people she feared. It was mediated by Axel. Soft touches, specific gestures, maybe a nod, then a signal they'd worked out in therapy.
So he wasn't just a comfort animal.
No, much more. The psychologist, later in the source, calls him a bridge to the world she no longer believed in. He was the safe conduit, the safe way for her to connect outwards again.
And this unique, fragile bridge is what they brought into that intimidating courtroom.
Which sets up this absolutely pivotal moment in the story, and Judge Penelope Ward is right at the center of it.
Tell us about her. The source paints her as quite formidable.
Oh yeah. 25 years on the bench, reputation for being crisp, clinical, by the book. Respected, maybe a little feared. Tall, reading glasses, pressed robe, hair in a nonsense bun. Pure authority figure.
But something was different that day.
Seems so. The source notes this subtle shift. She wasn't just processing a case, she really looked at Mira. Not with legal protocol, but with, quiet observation. Notice the clutched book, the stiff shoulders, those dangling feet.
And she noticed Mira looking at Axel.
That flicker of connection between them, the judge seemed to pick up on it, on its significance.
And she responded to that unspoken dynamic, didn't she?
She did. She leaned forward. And the source makes a point of saying her voice was softer than anyone in the courtroom had ever heard it. She spoke directly to Mira.
What did she say?
She acknowledged the difficulty, said, "Mira, I need to ask you something," but then offered an alternative. "You don't have to answer with words. You can nod or shake your head or look at Axel. I will understand."
She created a space for Mira's truth, however it came.
Exactly. Gave her permission for that nonverbal communication to be valid in that formal setting.
The silence after that offer must have been intense.
Huge. The source describes it stretching out, getting heavy. Everyone in the room, lawyers, clerk, reporter, just paused, holding their breath almost, as if afraid a keystroke might shatter the moment. All eyes on Mira.
And then?
Slowly, deliberately, her right hand came up, just a small movement, and she drew the small circle in the air with her pinky finger. Barely visible. Soft, like a whisper.
A signal.
A signal Axel recognized instantly. His ears lifted, he stood up, smooth, fluid motion, walked through the gate right to Mira's side. The bailiff apparently started to move, then stopped when the judge looked at him.
So Axel goes right to her side.
Sits down next to her, facing the courtroom, like he's standing guard. Calm, steady, watchful.
And Mira finished the signal.
She tapped her chest. Once, then again, twice.
And Axel.
One single bark. Short, clear. The signal was delivered.
What was the reaction in the room? Chaos.
More like confusion. A ripple through the room. Whispers. The source mentions the mother covering her mouth, tears starting. This wasn't standard courtroom procedure, you know?
No. And the judge.
She sat upright. Her expression apparently was unreadable, but her eyes were locked on Mira, searching her face, trying to understand. She asked, her voice low but direct, "What does that mean?" Demanding clarification.
And the psychologist stepped in.
Yes, from the back of a courtroom. Looking pale, hands trembling a bit. She explained it wasn't random, it was a practiced communication sequence.
Something they'd worked on.
Exactly. It's how she tells the truth, the psychologist explained, when she's too afraid to speak out loud, linking that bark directly to Mira's fear and her truth.
And there was more to it. The envelope.
Right. The psychologist was holding this small, cream-colored envelope. She held it out to the judge, saying, "She gave me this yesterday. She told me only give this to the judge if Axel barks."
So the bark was the trigger, the key.
It unlocked this piece of evidence. Judge Ward took the envelope, and the source really emphasizes her care in that moment. Fingers steady, but maybe some uncertainty in her eyes, opening it slowly, peeling back the flap as though it contained something sacred.
Knowing it held something important and inside.
The drawing, a crayon drawing, but the source calls it precise in its pain.
What did it show?
It showed Mira, unmistakably huddled in a corner, arms over her head, and looming over her, this tall figure, red-faced, twisted in anger, clenched fists, open mouth like a silent roar.
Oh, wow. Powerful imagery.
And in the corner of the drawing, Axel, positioned protectively between Mira and the figure. Body low, mid-bark, eyes sharp and watchful, a child's raw depiction of the trauma and her protector.
How did the judge react to seeing that?
Visibly moved. The source says she just stared at it, lips pressed tight, swallowing hard, fighting tears. It hit her differently than other evidence. None had ever looked her in the face like this. Truth through broken lines and bold crayon.
Not legalese, but raw feeling.
Exactly, and then she turned it over.
There was writing on the back.
Yes, in uneven block letters with a blue marker. Simple, devastating words. He says he cares, but I only feel safe when he's not there.
Just direct.
Oh, no.
A child's truth.
9 words summing it all up. The fear, the betrayal.
And the reaction.
A gasp from the gallery. And the father.
Yeah.
He jumped up, knocked his chair over, started protesting loudly. This is absurd. That dog's trained. She could have. Just losing it.
Chaos erupting. But the judge took control.
Immediately, her voice snapped, sharp. Sit down, she commanded, or I will have you removed. He froze. And through all that, Mira and Axel just remained steady. A unit.
How did the judge handle the drawing itself after that?
With real care, placed it on the bench deliberately, fingers lingering, treating it like it was fragile, alive almost. She called it a child's raw truth, unfiltered by adult logic or legal argument. It hit harder than any report could.
So even though she'd been silenced by fear, her truth found a way out. Through Axel, through the drawing, through that signal, it changed everything in that room.
Absolutely. But the father wasn't quite done. Still standing, red-faced, agitated, still accusing them of manipulation, coaching the dog.
Trying to regain control.
Yeah, but Judge Ward just cut him off again, coldly.
This court, she said firmly, does not take well to intimidation. You may sit, or you may be escorted out. And the bailiff stepped forward.
Just a step, yeah, enough. The father finally sat down, silence again, but thick with tension.
And Axel, what was he doing during this?
Still perfectly steady, gaze forward, but the source notes he leaned just slightly into Mira's leg. A tiny, physical reassurance. I'm here!
And that seemed to affect Mira.
Yes! Her shoulders, which had been so tense, shifted slightly, like a physical weight lifting off her. Her truth was out there now.
And then, the moment no one expected.
After 18 months, silence broken. With the softest voice the room had ever heard, Mira spoke.
What did she say? I remember the quote is so powerful.
She said, Axel knows who keeps me safe. He remembers everything, even when I couldn't.
Wow. Just wow.
Yeah. Those words, so quiet. But the source says they struck like thunder, not because of volume, but just because they existed, after all that silence. A quiet but seismic miracle.
How did the judge react to hearing her voice?
She blinked, leaned forward again. Her usual sternness was there, but the source mentions a look of reverence now. And her response wasn't judicial, it felt human. Mira, thank you. Just that. Gently spoken.
Powerful acknowledgement.
It really hung in the air. Even Axel reacted subtly. Ears twitched, leaned closer, brushed her arm like an affirmation.
And Mira herself.
Didn't look at her father, didn't flinch. Just kept her gaze forward. She'd said what she needed to say.
The judge then turned to the mother.
Who was just tears streaming. Her lawyer had a hand on her arm, but her focus was entirely on Mira. You can imagine the mix of emotions, awe, sorrow, pride, heartbreak. Hearing that small voice carry the weight of everything unspoken.
And them, the ruling.
Judge Ward's voice, steady and clear now. Ma'am, I am granting you full custody of your child. The silent truth finally validated by law.
Was there an eruption in the court?
No, interestingly, more like a collective exhale. The source calls it a quiet, collective release, like the building had been holding its breath, and finally it exhaled.
Like the tension finally broke.
Exactly. The father started to react, but a look from the bailiff stopped him. The judge didn't even bang her gavel. The moment didn't need it. What lingered was what had been felt, something sacred.
And the judge had one final act.
Yeah, as she gathered her files, the usual routine, but she paused, hand hovering over the gavel. Looked around the room, mother, father, then her gaze settled on Mira and Axel.
And she spoke to Mira again.
Yes. Not as Judge Ward, really. Her voice wavered just a bit. She said, "You've said more with a single signal than most adults say in 1,000 words."
Acknowledging the power of that communication.
Absolutely. And then she set the gavel down, softly. The source says, not in judgment, but in awe. Then she left the bench. The room stayed silent, changed.
The source doesn't end there, does it? It jumps forward.
6 months later, a different kind of silence. Peaceful, a sunny park bench, Mira's drawing again, trees, birds, and a familiar dog. Axel's curled beside her, relaxed but alert.
And Mira, is she fully recovered?
The source is careful about that. It says she's just healing slowly, steadily. Not broken, but healing. She still doesn't talk a lot, but she laughs now, makes eye contact, sleeps through the night. Small steps, but huge progress. Her therapist calls it progress. Her mom calls it a miracle.
And there's an interaction.
Yeah, a little boy comes up, wants to pet Axel. Can I pet your dog? He asks. Mira looks up. There's a moment, a flicker of the old fear, the instinct to withdraw.
But she chooses differently this time.
She puts her pencil down, closes her notebook, and gently taps her chest. The signal.
Using her truth, her language for connection now, not trauma.
Exactly, and Axel gets it, one friendly bark, tail wagging. The little boy laughs.
And then Mira laughs.
A real laugh. The source describes it catching in her chest, then spilling out like sunshine. Not just sound, but life. It's this beautiful sign that the bridge worked. Healing is happening. She's still here.
Wow. What a powerful story from Axel's bark. It really hammers home the idea that communication is so much more than just spoken words.
It really does. And the role of Axel, the service animal, not just comfort, but an active participant in her recovery, a bridge back to safety and connection. It's incredible.
And the clarity of a child's truth, when it's finally given a space, even non-verbally, it can be undeniable. Courage showing up in such unexpected ways.
Definitely. Those key moments, the drawing, the words on the back, that single bark, Mira's first soft words after so long, the judge's reaction, setting the gavel down gently, they all speak volumes about finding truth beyond the usual channels.
It really makes you reflect, doesn't it? How much do we miss by only listening for words? How important it is to truly observe, to create space for truth in whatever form it takes.
It leads to a bigger question, I think. How many other important truths are out there, maybe going unheard right now because we're not attuned to the language they're being spoken in? What other ways of communicating truth are we missing because we expect it to fit our usual boxes?
That's a really provocative thought to end on. What other languages of truth are waiting to be understood? Something for all of us to think about.